Did you know that during the second half of your menstrual cycle and when you're premenstrual, that you actually have an increased need for specific nutrients, and that ensuring adequate intake of these nutrients may actually help reduce PMS and PMDD symptoms? Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a clinical nutritionist, and this channel is all about optimizing your diet and lifestyle for better mental health. So if that's something that you're passionate about, then I would love for you to subscribe and join our community. Today we're talking about something super cool and incredibly relevant for the menstruating community, and yet they are nutritional factors that aren't discussed a lot, which is a shame because focusing on increasing these nutrients during the luteal phase of your menstrual cycle, which is basically the second half of your menstrual cycle post-ovulation, can actually help reduce the severity of PMS symptoms, especially when it comes to your mood. I have 3 nutrients that we're going to go over today, so let's dive into what exactly these nutrients are and how to get them. So, you know how people say that chocolate cravings, especially PMS chocolate cravings, are an indicator of needing magnesium? Well, I don't know how exactly true that is because we all have different food associations, and therefore you could be craving chocolate for a variety of different reasons. But it is true that magnesium is a mineral that we do really want to focus on during this phase of our cycle. While we don't have a ton of research studying the changes in micronutrient levels throughout the menstrual cycle, which is actually a huge issue for research, but that's another topic for another time. There have been a few studies that have looked at these changes in micronutrient levels throughout the menstrual cycle, and some of them had some really interesting findings. This study found that while many micronutrient concentrations are relatively constant across the menstrual cycle in healthy women, zinc and magnesium decline and the prevalence of magnesium deficiency increases. Magnesium decreased from the early follicular phase to the luteal phase. But among the study participants, magnesium deficiency was most observed during the mid-luteal phase, which is when that PMS window starts, compared to the follicular phase. There have been other studies as well that have suggested that magnesium fluctuations during the menstrual cycle are likely a contributor to PMS symptoms like fluid retention, cravings, and mood changes, particularly anxiety. A personal note about me is while I actually don't experience generalized anxiety really at all anymore on a daily basis, if I ever do experience any anxiety, it is 100% during this premenstrual window, and it's normally just a day or two before I actually start menstruating. I would love to know from the menstruating community below. Please leave a comment and let us know if you're comfortable with it, if you experience heightened anxiety during a certain point in your menstrual cycle, or if you've made any correlations regarding the timing. So what foods are high in magnesium that we can try and work on increasing in our diet during this time? Pumpkin seeds are one of my top PMS foods because they actually contain a plant form of L-tryptophan, which is a precursor for many of our neurotransmitters that help us feel like at calm and at ease. So they're kind of a double whammy in that sense. Nuts and seeds, particularly almond, cashews, and chia seeds, are high in magnesium, as well as peanuts, even though that's technically a legume. Other legumes like black beans and chickpeas, dark leafy greens, and fish is the highest protein source of magnesium. The second nutrient that we really want to focus on during this premenstrual window is vitamin B6. Vitamin B6 is a water-soluble vitamin, which essentially means that we do not store it in the body like we do other fat-soluble vitamins or even minerals. So with water-soluble vitamins, it generally means that we need a pretty constant supply of them on a daily basis to ensure that we're getting adequate levels. The reason why vitamin B6 is a nutrient that we particularly want to focus on during this time is because it plays a huge role in neurotransmitter synthesis. Vitamin B6 B6 is necessary for the conversion of the amino acid L-tryptophan into serotonin, and vitamin B6 along with magnesium are both actually required for the synthesis of our inhibitory neurotransmitter GABA, which is a neurotransmitter that's responsible for making us feel calm and at ease. It's for these reasons that vitamin B6 in combination with magnesium is actually a pretty common supplemental intervention for supporting neurotransmitters, but also for supporting PMS. Several publications have looked at the combination of magnesium and B6 for PMS, many of which finding that although magnesium on its own does provide a decreased severity of symptoms, magnesium and B6 together is even more effective at decreasing the severity of depression, cravings, and anxiety symptoms. The last thing that I want to say about B6 is that although B6 deficiencies isn't something that a lot of people think of or isn't super well explored in the literature, a national survey did find that females of childbearing age actually have the lowest levels of B6 out of all populations. This population was deemed to be significantly lower to the male counterparts of the same age, regardless of supplemental use. In addition to this, these findings were the lowest for females on oral contraceptives, which of course is not surprising. OTCs are known for their many nutrient depletions. So let's talk about the foods that are high in B6. Some of these foods are really fun. Pretty much the highest dietary source of B6 are chickpeas, particularly canned chickpeas. Very closely followed up by beef liver. It's relatively high in other protein sources, not as high as it is in liver, but there's an adequate amount in fish, poultry, beef, and eggs as well. It's fairly high in one of my favorite nuts, pistachios. And then there's a few random fruits and vegetables like avocados, bananas, potatoes that have a decent source as well. The third and last nutrient that we're going to talk about today that's really important to focus on during this premenstrual window is actually a macronutrient, and that's carbohydrates. As with many things, carbohydrates are all about context. When premenstrual, we want to focus on more complex, slow-burning carbohydrates, so more starch-based forms, rather than simple sugars. Now, low-carb diets may work for some, but I do see a pretty prevalent trend among women where essentially they'll be on like a grain-free, some form of paleo, lower-carb diet, and they'll be avoiding grains, which is fine, but also starchier like root vegetables, and then essentially get to a point during their day, like maybe you have a green smoothie for breakfast and a salad for lunch, but then later in the afternoon or dinner, the carb cravings really catch up with you, and then you have these like date energy ball things that are actually incredibly high on the glycemic index. So not only will a lot of those higher glycemic foods like dates throw off our blood sugar, but complex carbohydrates are actually going to help with serotonin synthesis. So carbs and tryptophan, which tryptophan is the amino acid that I mentioned earlier, that's the precursor to serotonin. Well, these two have a really interesting relationship where carbs essentially help L-tryptophan cross the blood-brain barrier. What has been observed in women with severe PMS and PMDD is that their symptoms are aggravated during tryptophan depletion. So we really want to make sure that we're getting enough tryptophan, and having adequate carbohydrates in our diet is really going to help with the availability of the tryptophan. In order to get this benefit but not have your blood sugar spike drastically, which may lead to symptoms of anxiety and things like that, I like to focus on those slow burning carbohydrates from sources like root vegetables, for example. So that could be sweet potato, rutabaga, beets, parsnips, anything like that. Overall, a whole foods diet that's rich in both complex carbohydrates and protein is going to ensure that you have adequate tryptophan and serotonin levels. So there's definitely a lot at play when it comes to nutrient interactions and fluctuations throughout the menstrual cycle. But what I'm hoping that you take away from this is that many of the common symptoms that are experienced, especially those related to mood, are actually heightened when there is a lack of nutrients. This is really important because if we're trying to restrict things too much during this window, it could really backfire. And if you didn't know this, menstruating females actually have an increased caloric need during that luteal phase, second half of your menstrual cycle. Our basal metabolic rate increases by 10 to 20% during this time, which ultimately means that we have a general increased caloric need of about 100 to 300 calories depending on the person. So having more calories and more nutrients on hand may be the thing to help us sidestep PMS. If you enjoyed this video, then don't forget to subscribe and hit the like or thumbs up. It's the best way to support the content that I create. And you may enjoy this video here that's all about omega-3 fats if you haven't seen it yet, because omega-3 fats are also super important for actually decreasing inflammation in your menstrual cycle. So hopefully I'll see you in that one.